righty. So according to my notes, we finished with the first half of the lecture, which is classical conditioning. Remember that classical conditioning, like with this example from The Office, he classically conditioned Dwight to salivate at the sound of a computer noise. So with that, we have unconditioned stimulus, unconditioned response, the neutral stimulus, the conditioned stimulus, and the conditioned response. That deals with involuntary behavior. Now we're moving on to the next chapter, or the next section of the chapter, that deals with operant conditioning. And y'all, operant conditioning deals with voluntary behavior. So you're making a decision to engage in a behavior. All right. So some examples of that include training pigeons to peck at a certain shape, to train rats to push a lever, or even to train humans, because this is something that's going to be able to be applied not only to animals, but also to humans. So basically with operant conditioning, we're dealing with learning through consequence. And a lot of time we mistake consequence with having a negative connotation. Yeah, the consequence is just an effect. There are always consequences for our behavior. Sometimes there's positive consequences, sometimes there's negative consequences. But according to the behaviorist approach of psychology, they believe that, like John Locke, we're all born with a tabula rasa, a blank slate, and that everything that we end up learning or we end up doing or becoming is based on our environment. They're not so much concerned with cognitive things. They're not so much concerned with the unconscious or the id or the superego. They're more concerned with what they can objectively measure. Since we can't study stream of consciousness, since we can't study introspection, instead, we need to focus on what we can see and measure and observe. Okay, B.F. Skinner is going to be one of the leaders of the behaviorist movement. And his name, B.F., that's just Burris Frederick. Interesting name, Burris. If you're looking for baby names, put that on your list. It's very unique. So he's the most significant name in behaviorism, and he wanted to study how behaviorism could be applied not only to animals, but to humans. And he studied this through the creation of his Skinner box, or operant, chamber. So with operant conditioning, we're dealing with learning through consequences, and that's going to involve reinforcement and punishment. There's positive and negative reinforcement, and there's positive and negative punishment. Reinforcement is a reward. So what does it do to behavior?
Encourages it.
It encourages it. It increases it. What does punishment do to behavior?
Weakens it.
It weakens it, it decreases it, exactly right. That's one of the key issues that students get confused in their FRQs. They may be given an FRQ and they're asked to apply negative reinforcement, but instead of them talking about a reward through the subtraction of an aversive stimulus, they start talking like it's a punishment. Okay, and that's not going to get you the point. So make sure you know the difference between positive and negative. It doesn't mean good or bad. It means adding or subtracting. And the difference between reinforcement and punishment. One always increases a behavior and one always decreases a behavior. Okay, so here we have Skinner with his Skinner box, or his operant chamber, basically to study animals and humans in order to see whether or not their behavior could be controlled or changed through a series of punishment or rewards. And here's a little joke for you: air conditioner, air crib, and baby tender. All right, so this was going to be be the focus of parenting techniques for a while. Of your behavior with your children actually determines who they become, more so than it being genetically based or cognitively based. So however you treat your child has a lasting effect on their development as a human being. Some of the videos that we have in the lecture series go over that Skinner box, but for time purposes, we're going to move through most of the videos. There's going to be some videos that we talk about together. So with operant conditioning, You have two types of enforcing reinforcements or punishment. You can use fixed conditioning or varying conditioning. Fixed means that it's always the same amount. And that amount can either be the number of behaviors or rewards. So hold on real quick while I get my pen working. Which is known as ratio, the ratio schedule. Or it can be based on time, the interval. So fixed is always the same. Varying means that it's a differing amount. So let's say that your parents came in and checked on you in your bedroom to see if you were studying. And they came in every 30 minutes on the dot. Okay, is that fixed or varying? That's fixed. Good, I saw how Young say it. What about ratio or interval? Which schedule is it? If they come in every 30 minutes, is it the number of times or the amount of time?
Interval.
It's interval, the amount of time. They're coming in every 30 minutes. But let's say that they mixed it up. They come and check on you every 5 minutes, then it goes to 8 minutes, then it goes to an hour, then it goes down to 20 minutes. Okay, then you're less likely to learn that schedule. And so you're more likely to continue studying because you never know when they're going to pop in, kind of like a pop quiz. So you have fixed interval and varying ratio, or sorry, fixed interval and varying interval, and you have fixed ratio and varying ratio. And we're going to go through examples of that. But first, before we do that, I wanted to go through this video. We watched the show The Office to look at classical conditioning. Now we're going to look at an example from The Big Bang Theory for operant conditioning.
This show is amazing.
It's pretty funny, bazinga. So with this, it's important to note that operant conditioning deals with voluntary behavior. Now they do make a mistake in this video. They confuse negative reinforcement with punishment. Okay, so whenever you hear them say negative reinforcement, just switch it with punishment because they make the same mistake that most AP students make on this exam. Alrighty, so I'm gonna move over to the video. Y'all ready?
Are you finished?
Well, thank you. How thoughtful. Would you like a chocolate?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, Sheldon, I almost sat in your spot.
Did you? I didn't notice. Have a chocolate.
Thank you.
You're here a lot now.
Am I talking too much? I'm sorry. Zip.
Thank you. Chocolate?
Yeah. You know what? Hold on. Let me take this in the hall. You'll never guess who they got to replace you with.
Okay. I know what you're doing. Really?
Yes. You're using chocolates as positive reinforcement for what you consider correct behavior.
Very good. Chocolate?
No, I won't. Sheldon, you can't train my girlfriend like a lab rat.
Actually, it turns out I can.
Well, you shouldn't.
There's just no pleasing you, is there, Leonard? You weren't happy with my previous approach to dealing with her, so I decided to employ operant conditioning techniques, building on the works of Thorndike and B.F. Skinner. Yet by this time next week, I believe I can have her jumping out of a pool, balancing a beach ball on her nose.
No, This has to stop now.
I'm not suggesting we really make her jump out of a pool. I thought the bazinga was implied. I'm just tweaking her personality, just sanding off the rough edges, if you will.
No, you're not sanding Penny.
Are you saying that I am forbidden from applying a harmless, scientifically valid protocol that will make our lives better?
Yes, you're forbidden.
Leonard. You know, using positive reinforcement techniques, I could train that behavior out of her in a week.
No.
If you let me use negative reinforcement, I can get done before we go to bed.
You're not squirting her in the face with water.
No, of course not. We're talking very mild electric shocks. No tissue damage whatsoever.
Forget it.
Come on. You can't tell me that you're not intrigued about the possibility of building a better girlfriend.
I'm not. Well, Penny's qualities, both good and bad, are what make her who she is.
You mean like that high-pitched, irritating laugh?
Yes.
You wouldn't prefer a throaty chuckle?
You're not changing how Penny laughs.
No, that would be incongruous. I was going to lower the whole voice to a more pleasing register.
Sorry, guys. That girl is freaky.
Come again?
Freaky.
Freaky?
Yeah, freaky.
Have a chocolate.
Thank you.
I'm going to make some warm milk and then turn in. I trust if you two are planning on engaging in amorous activities, you'll keep the decibel level to a minimum.
Of course.
Thank you.
Unbelievable. I was just thinking we should probably turn into.
Well, yeah, my new bed got delivered. If you come over and put it together, you can stay at my place.
Really? That's a lot of work and it's kind of late.
Yeah, but if we stay there, we won't have to be quiet.
Let's go.
Interesting. Sex works even better than chocolate to modify behavior. If anyone else has stumbled onto that.
Alrighty, so like with our quiz that we did at the beginning of this lecture, we're going to create another one of those graphs that helps us determine the difference between positive and negative and reinforcement and punishment. So you already have this graph from that quiz. If you want to redo it as we go through the lecture, that's perfectly fine as well. Remember that with positive, it's adding a stimulus, and with negative, it's subtracting a stimulus. Now, if it's a desired stimulus, it's reinforcement. If it is taking away a desired stimulus, it's punishment. If it is providing a aversive stimulus, it's punishment. And if it's taking away an aversive stimulus, then it's reinforcement. Okay, so make sure that you keep that straight. This is one of those things that I use, like if you're writing an FRQ, create that chart so you can delineate the definition before you move on to applying it. Okay, remember that with reinforcement, it doesn't matter if it's positive or negative, it is going to increase a particular behavior. Okay, one example of negative reinforcement, because that's one of the harder ones for people to come up with, like positive reinforcement, it's easy. You get something you want in response to your behavior. Now, it could be money, it can be food, it could be cats, whatever. But negative reinforcement is a lot more difficult for people to come up with an example. So I have an example here on the slide. What happens when you get into your car and you don't buckle your seatbelt? I know, Gavin, you're not driving yet, so this may be a little.
Yes, I am.
Oh, you're driving now?
Yeah.
Oh, cool deal. What car?
Just a truck. Like I have my permit, not like my license yet.
Gotcha. I didn't start driving until I was 18, so I really can't talk. You fly out of a window if you crash. Well, I'm talking about before the crash, Sam. If you get into your car, you open the door, sit down, turn the car on, no seatbelt on. What
Get
happens?
yelled at.
Yeah, because you're not driving alone. So you get yelled at, or the car yells at you. All right, the car will beep at you. And is that a fun sound? Does that beeping slap? Okay, no.
Kind of smoothing,
Yeah.
soothing.
If you're moving, yeah, if you drive the car with that, yeah. So that sound is something that's very annoying and irritating. You want it to go away. Okay, it's not like, oh, drop a beep, right? And so how do you get that beeping to go away? What behavior do you have to do?
Put your seatbelt on.
Put your seatbelt on, exactly right. So with this, it's negative reinforcement because you're getting rewarded. When you buckle your seatbelt, the beeping stops. An aversive stimulus has been removed from your environment. Okay, so positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement encourages behavior by giving a reward. Okay, so positive reinforcement could include, like in this picture, you get a high five, or you get praise from your teacher, or you get an A on your assignment, right? That's positive reinforcement. That's going to encourage the behavior that earned that reward in the first place. Negative reinforcement also acts as a reward because it removes something that is aversive. Okay, so again, like in all caps on this slide, you need to make sure in your notes that negative reinforcement is not the same as punishment. So in the Big Bang Theory, when Sheldon said, oh, I could use negative reinforcement with mild electric shock, he got that wrong. Okay, that is not what negative reinforcement is. That's punishment. Okay. An example of negative reinforcement that y'all may be familiar with other than driving is whenever you have a headache, right? Whenever you have pain in your head, what behavior do you do in order to get rid of that pain?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
What do you do in order to get rid of your headache? What behavior?
Drink water.
Okay, so you could be dehydrated. I know that when I'm going through Twitter or Instagram, like I'll occasionally see a post saying, in case you need it, drink water, right? Or focus on something else. Or like Tucker said, pills. Okay, so ibuprofen or aspirin. So when you get a headache, you turn to medication. And when you take that medication, the pain goes away. That's going to increase your behavior of taking medicine. Okay. A punishment version of that would be, what if you get really sick and you take a cough medicine that tastes awful? Okay. You don't want that cough medicine. And so since it adds an aversive stimulus, that would be a punishment, because if you don't like the taste of the medicine, then you're not likely to actually take it when you need it. Okay. But with negative reinforcement with, say, pain medication, it takes away the aversive stimulus of that pain. And so that's going to increase your likelihood of taking that medication. Punishment, in contrast, decreases a behavior. It discourages a behavior through aversive stimulus. So you have two types: negative punishment and positive punishment. Negative punishment is when you take away something you want. Positive punishment is when you add something you don't want. So what would be an example of negative punishment? What do your parents do to punish you with negative punishment? The room? Okay, so what, do they make you sleep on the porch?
Why do I have the feeling Sam's gonna put something in there that's just gonna be like totally?
Or what about when parents take away the door? Any of y'all had that, or you've heard of that, where parents have taken away their, y'all are not getting locked in the basement. That's the game room. So they take away their child's door, so taking away their privacy. I've even, there have been some examples where parents have cut their children's hair as a negative punishment, taking away their identity. Now that's pretty extreme, right? You come near me with a pair of scissors cutting my hair, you're getting decked, right? So those types of negative punishments can be very detrimental to someone's self-esteem and to their identity, but it is effective in decreasing an undesired behavior. Positive punishment is when you add something that's not liked. So whereas negative punishment, you take away the door, or you take away the cell phone, or you take away someone's hair. Hey, Lauren, with, did you get her? He's about to go lay it down on Lauren. You go and get her. That reminded me of a Twitter post that I saw where it was like, were you the sibling that chased them with the knife, or were you the sibling getting chased? It was like, yeah, it depends on the day. If you have siblings, you know. Also, positive punishment could include things like corporal punishment, like we talked about with spanking, okay? Vegetables could be positive punishment as well. Okay, so which one is more effective? The more effective form of operant conditioning is going to be reinforcement. It's always better to reinforce rather than it is to punish, because one of the things about humans is that we get really good at avoiding punishment. So it doesn't necessarily mean that we learn the lesson. It's more so that we just learn how not to get caught. Okay, so another thing is that reinforcement and punishment are most effective when the consequence immediately follows the behavior and is applied consistently. Okay, so if let's say, for instance, you have a puppy, right? And you're trying to potty train that puppy. Well, when that puppy goes TT on the carpet, you know that you need to catch them. That's an interesting emoji to use, Gavin. Confetti. That's what makes us great Among Us players. What, puppies? Or reinforcement? Lying. Oh, that's right. That's right. Anyway, puppy example. I'm sorry, I'm getting all over the place. The puppy example is if you find your puppy TTing on the carpet, you know that you need to grab them immediately, put their nose in it, and spray them with a water bottle or whatever it is that you do to punish your animals, right? But what happens if you get home and you find that the puppy had TT'd on the carpet, but the TT's cold? That could have happened in the morning. You're getting home in the evening. Does it make any sense to take that dog and stick its nose in the pee puddle hours after it peed? No, because it's not going to know what you're trying to send as a message. It doesn't think like humans do. It's not going to be able to say, I shouldn't pee on the carpet. It's going to start associating you coming home with punishment. So instead of teaching your dog to not pee on the carpet, instead you teach your dog to run away from you when you get home, because it knows, I'm going to be punished for whatever. Okay, now with humans, we're a little bit better at logical thinking. And so even if you don't get caught immediately with a behavior, you can still get a punishment later after the initial behavior, and it's still effective as a form of operant conditioning. Okay, but it's better to have it follow immediately and to apply it consistently. So every time you do the negative behavior, to be punished for it, or every time you do the positive behavior, you get rewarded for it. Okay, so you want to make sure that it is contiguous, that it's as close as possible, and that it is consistent. Okay, but if you have to pick one or the other, reinforcement or punishment, okay, reinforcement is always more effective. Good so far? Now, when we talk about reinforcers, we're talking about the things that increase or decrease behavior. And reinforcers in particular are going to fall into one of two categories. They can either be primary reinforcers or conditioned reinforcers. Primary reinforcers are the kind that are innately satisfying. Okay, so food and water, those are things that are innately satisfying. You don't have to learn that they are reinforcing. Okay, that's something that comes naturally. Whereas conditioned reinforcers are satisfying because they're associated with a primary reinforcer. They are learned. Okay, so for instance, money is a conditioned reinforcer because money is not innately valuable. Y'all, we make up money. The only reason or the only thing that makes it valuable is that we all agree that you can exchange it for goods and services. But if there were a zombie apocalypse and the government shut down and all of that, water would be a much better resource. Food would be a heightened resource. You wouldn't be able to go around and flash dollar bills and say, I want to get a carton of water. Okay, it wouldn't be able to work like that. So we associate money as being a reinforcer that influences our behavior because of what we can do with that money. We can exchange it for goods and services. So food, water, sex because of its association with dopamine receptors, affiliation. We are social creatures. We're like pack animals. So we have those relationships with others, and the removal of pain. All of that is primary. All of that is innate, but we associate them with other things that become reinforcers. Okay, so like your favorite food, like tropical smoothie cafe or McDonald's. Okay, that is a learned reinforcer. Soda, okay, is a conditioned reinforcer. You may associate, well, say for instance, you may associate that with someone you have a crush on or someone that you're dating. Okay, so you are happier when you're around them. So when you see them, that's reinforced. A birthday party or Thanksgiving. Okay, that could be a learned or conditioned reinforcer associated with affiliation. And then Advil and Tylenol. Okay, we take it when we're in pain rather than taking Smarties or sour gummies, right? Because we associate it with the removal of pain. Does that make sense so far? All right, so now we're going to do a little example where you're going to take positive and negative reinforcement and punishment, and you're going to apply it to this scenario. So this is an example of an FRQ. Now remember, with an FRQ, you're going to answer TAD. Okay, term, application, and the definition. So you need to use the term positive reinforcement and define it. Then you need to apply it to this scenario. Now this scenario is a little girl screaming when she's put in a grocery shopping cart. And her father wants to increase the behavior of her sitting quietly and decrease the behavior of her screaming and crying. Now, not all of the information is provided here. If you want to add things to the scenario that aren't inherently listed, like you're in a grocery store, is there anything in the grocery store that can be used in this application? Okay, that's perfectly fine to think outside of that box, but make sure that you're explicit in your application because otherwise you won't get the point. So let's start with positive reinforcement. Go ahead and in the chat, give a definition for positive reinforcement. I got a response from that email, Grace. Well, it says that info has been posted on the Google Classroom for a week. So I'm assuming that it's confirming that we continue to have class next week.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, so adding a stimulus to increase the desired behavior. All right, so make sure that you use the terms and make sure it's a complete sentence. So positive reinforcement is a type of operant conditioning in which a stimulus is added to increase a desired behavior. That would be a good definition. Now, Gavin, you went ahead and you did the application. Okay, but that's still fine. So what is the positive reinforcement? You're adding the desired stimulus of candy in order to increase what behavior? Sitting in the cart quietly. Okay, so do you see how that application was applied? Okay, now let's do negative reinforcement. What's the definition for negative reinforcement? Nathan's thinking up something. I saw a smile. All right, negative reinforcement is a form of operant conditioning in which an undesired stimulus is taken away to increase a certain behavior. All right, good. And Itzel as well. When a stimulus is subtracted to increase a behavior. All of y'all are exactly right. Specifically when you mentioned the removal of an undesirable stimulus. Okay, so what is an example of negative reinforcement that can be applied to this scenario? What undesirable stimulus could be taken away to convince the girl to shut the heck up? Remove her from the shopping cart. Okay, if the shopping cart is what's making her freak out, then maybe you remove her from the shopping cart because she wants to walk alongside with you, or she thinks she's too grown for the grocery cart. We don't know how old this girl is. Maybe she's embarrassed. Maybe she's 12 years old and her dad put her in the cart. Like her legs have to be sawed out of the cart because they're too big. Okay. Her dad might offer to take away her chores if she's quiet. Good. That's another thing. Like, I will take away you having to clean the litter box if you'll sit quietly for this entire grocery trip. Okay. Remember, reinforcement is not a punishment. This is a reward. Okay. Now let's move on to positive punishment. What is the definition for positive punishment? Positive punishment is a type of operant conditioning in which an undesirable stimulus is added to discourage behavior. Exactly right. So what could be added to this scenario that the little girl would not want in order to decrease her crying? Have y'all ever heard your parents say, oh, you're going to cry? I'm going to give you something to cry about. It's like, I'm already crying. I don't need anything else. I like your definition, Gavin. That's good. The dad could scream back, okay? So if your kid is crying, you just cry louder. You're like, oh, now it's a competition. We'll see who can last longer. I'll tell you that the kid's probably going to last longer. Kids are spiteful and they have way too much energy. Although I'm just internally screaming for most of my time. Falcon punch. All right, so corporal punishment. Let's not get over into the line on abuse. I'm pretty sure punching your child is a no-no, although I don't have kids, so don't ask me. She could be grounded. Okay, but that's where it gets weird between negative and positive punishment, because if you're grounding, what makes grounding so undesirable? When you're grounded, things are taken away. You get TV time taken away. You get your phone taken away. You get your time with friends taken away. So being grounded might be a better example for negative punishment, because it's the taking away of something in order to decrease the crime. So let's save that one for negative punishment. Okay, so positive punishment would be yelling, or it could be corporal punishment. What about negative punishment? Spencer already gave us an example of it, but what's the definition for negative punishment?
Wait, so positive punishment is taking away something good and negative is putting something bad,
No,
or the other way around?
positive punishment is adding something undesired. So like hitting with like spanking. Negative punishment is a form of operant conditioning in which a desired stimulus is taken away to decrease a certain behavior. Excellent. So you say what is added or subtracted, specifically an undesirable stimulus, and you also say its effect on behavior. If you had just said negative punishment is a form of operant conditioning in which a desired stimulus is taken away, but you don't talk about its effect on behavior, then that wouldn't be a good enough definition. You have to actually say, does it increase or decrease the behavior? Excellent. And like Spencer said, grounding would be an example of that because you're taking away something you want, like your phone or your TV time. Okay. So with classical versus operant conditioning, remember that the main difference between this type of learning is that one is voluntary behavior and the other is involuntary behavior. Classical deals with involuntary, operant deals with voluntary. Okay, so it's key to remember those differences. Good so far? All right, then on a sheet of paper, draw out this chart because we're going to talk about the schedules of reinforcement. And within the schedules of reinforcement, you have continuous reinforcement and you have variable reinforcement. Okay, and that's going to deal with ratio and interval. So again, continuous reinforcement is exactly what it sounds like. Every time the behavior occurs, you either punish or reward it. Okay, every time the behavior occurs, you punish or reward it. So the pros, the benefits to this, excuse me, the benefit with this is that learning occurs quickly. If you get rewarded every time you make an A, okay, then you're going to continue making A's. The con or the negative thing about this is that if all of a sudden you stop getting paid for the A's that you make or getting rewarded, then extinction happens very quickly. Okay, the extinction of the behavior. So whereas this learning happens rapidly, it is also undone very rapidly. Partial or intermittent reinforcement is a lot more effective. So this is when you reinforce a behavior only part of the time. So rather than understanding that, oh, every time I do this, I'm going to be rewarded or punished, you are randomly rewarded or punished. Now, this does take a longer time to learn, but it also lasts longer. Okay, this is where we get the strength of gambling from. When y'all go to a casino, which I guess y'all haven't, but if you go to a casino, why are people playing the machines? After they've lost all that money, why do they continue hitting the button? Because they know that at some point, that machine is going to get lucky. They know that at some point, it's going to pay out. It may pay out the first time they hit the button. It may pay out the 20th time they hit the button. It may pay out the 100th time they hit the button. But they know they're reinforced to keep putting money into that machine because they know that at some point they're going to get rewarded for it, whether it's with a little money or a lot of money. So it reinforces that behavior. Hence why gambling addiction is such a difficult addiction to beat. So when we talk about continuous versus partial reinforcement, we're going to be talking about whether the number of behaviors is rewarded or if the amount of time between behaviors is rewarded. Okay, so with fixed ratio, that means that every time a certain number of behaviors is completed, you get rewarded. So a rat may push a lever 10 times, and on every 10th push, it gets a pellet of food. Okay, you know that that's a fixed ratio. 10 times to hit the button, you get a pellet. As opposed to variable ratio, which is like with gambling, where you don't know how many times you have to hit the button before you get a pellet, so you just keep hitting the button. It reinforces that behavior. Fixed interval is being rewarded or punished after a set amount of time. Okay, so for instance, y'all know that our 9 weeks are 9 weeks long. We have quarters, right? So you know that if you can just make it through this quarter, if you can get your 3 and 6, then you're done with that class and you can move on to your next class. Okay, that would be fixed interval. It's always the same amount of time. With variable interval, it's differing amount of times. Okay, so if I gave a pop quiz, you don't know if that quiz is going to be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, or Friday. So you know you need to study every night in case there's a pop quiz. That would be variable ratio, or sorry, variable interval. Does everyone have this chart? Okay, good, because we're going to fill it in with examples. Okay, first example, fixed ratio. This is when reinforcement always occurs after a certain number of behaviors. So like in our example before, a rat presses a button and then they get a pellet. Okay, they press it 5 times, they get a pellet. Another 5 times, they get a pellet. Another 5 times. It is fixed. The number of times is the same every time. What are some examples of this occurring with us? Now, we don't push buttons in order to get pellets, but what are some things in capitalism that encourage us to spend money that involves fixed ratio? What do businesses or restaurants or cafes do in order to get people coming back using fixed ratio principle? BOGO, okay, so buy one, get one, or subscriptions, or you spend 50, you get $5 off. Now with that spending 50, you get $5 off, that's an amount. I was thinking more in the lines of how many of you have ever gone to Cafe Louisa and you get the coffee card? Okay, if you buy 10 coffees, you get one free. Okay, or like Nathan said, buy one, get one. For every one you buy, you get another one. Okay, so the fixed ratio for buy one, get one is 1. The fixed ratio for Cafe Louisa's coffee card is 10. Okay, so if buy 10, get one free, that's an example of fixed ratio. Okay, but is this the element that gambling focuses on? No, because we know that if gambling at a casino said every time you play the machine 5 times, you get $1 million, well, then everyone would be at the casino and the casino wouldn't be making much money. So casinos don't focus on fixed ratio. They focus on variable ratio, where you don't know when the behavior is going to be rewarded. You know it is going to be rewarded, supposedly. You just don't know when. So in this example, a rat might push the button 4 times and get a pellet, 35 times and get a pellet, 1 time and get a pellet. All that rat knows is that it has to keep pushing that button. And this is the most powerful of the reinforcement schedules. Okay, the most powerful of the reinforcement schedules. Hence why gambling can be so addictive. Another example of how variable ratio applies to our life is dating. Okay, do you know how many people you have to date before you find the one? No. But you assume it's going to happen. It may be the first person that you date, maybe it's a high school sweetheart, or maybe you have to date 20 different people before you find the one. But we keep dating even after bad experiences because we think, okay, it may not be the next time, but maybe the time after that time. We keep going with the hopes that one day it will happen. Okay, and that's a very, very potent schedule of reinforcement. Okay, so we've done ratio. Now let's do interval. Interval deals with time. Fixed interval is reinforcement that always occurs after a certain amount of time. So with our rat example, if you have a rat pushing the button every 10 minutes, right, it knows that every 10 minutes it's going to get fed. Okay, same thing with us. We know that around 12:30, it is lunchtime. Okay, so it's always around the same time in the afternoon. Bold enough to assume we get taken. Oh, it is, what do the kids call it? Is it cuffing season? I don't know what that means, because to cuff means like to punch back in my day. So it's like, oh, we're just going to go punch each other. All right. All the time is snack time. That's a very good policy to follow. Okay. So with fixed interval, they know that's a certain amount of time. So if your parents are coming in and checking on you every 30 minutes to see if you're studying, you know you can set a timer. So for 25 minutes, you can be on the TikTok watching your Tic Tacs. But then when the alarm goes off, you know, okay, I need to pull out my book and pretend like I'm learning. Okay. Or lock the door. You can lock your door in your parents' house. Yeah, not back in my day. There's like you, unless you paid the rent, you couldn't be locking doors or slamming doors. Slamming or locking, like you'll get the door taken away from you. No door for you. Another example of this would be like weekly quizzes on Friday, like for Membean. If I remember correctly, y'all have a vocab quiz every Friday. So when do y'all tend to study? Are you studying on Mondays and Tuesdays? No, y'all tend to study Thursday or Friday, okay? Because you know that's when the quiz is gonna be. Now that's different from variable interval. With variable interval, you don't know when it's coming. So this would be the example of pop quizzes. If you're in a class that gives pop quizzes, which is the devil, then you know that you're gonna have to study every night just in case you get into class and they say, take out a piece of paper and a pencil, which I think like they just teach you at teacher school to just mess with kids. They're like, yeah, the best thing is just saying, take out a piece of paper and a pencil and just see how they react. You lock it so they have to come see what you're doing, so you have time to hide everything. Matthew, you're telling on yourself. Number 1 with Coach Norris. That's right, pop quiz time. So with this example with the rat, it's the rat must do the behavior. All right, it's key to note that the behavior is still being rewarded, but it's being rewarded at different times. So with pop quizzes, studying is being rewarded at different times. Whereas with a weekly quiz schedule, your studying is only being rewarded on the Thursday or the night before. Are we good so far? Now with rats and other animals, you need to give them gratification as soon as you can to make it as close as possible to the initial behavior, or else they're not going to make the connection. Okay, they're animals. But with humans, you can delay gratification or delay reinforcement, and they know that they're still getting a reward. For instance, I get paid once a month. Okay, I work throughout the entire month because I know even though I'm not paid at the end of every day with this is your $2 for the day, right? I know that that lump sum is going to be given at the end. So I continue working because I know that there will be delayed gratification. I don't get paid every day I come to work. I get paid at the end of a pay period, right? But the stronger reinforcement, the more effective reinforcement is immediate reinforcement, especially with y'all's age before your frontal lobe is fully developed by the age of 25. So that immediate gratification leads us to risky behavior. For instance, smoking, you get the immediate gratification of nicotine buzz. Okay, you're not thinking about cancer decades in the future. Or drinking, you're not thinking about losing your scholarship or getting a DUI. You're just thinking of a depressant. Okay, all of those things deal with immediate gratification. And so that's going to be a much stronger force than delayed gratification. Does that follow? All right. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit of a vocabulary check. So question 1, I want y'all to answer in the chat with which of these terms fulfills this definition. So blank is defined as learning that certain events occur together. The event may be two stimuli or a response and its consequences. Go ahead and put in the chat what you think the answer is. See, everyone's posting publicly. There's like, yeah, whichever answer they put first. My last class in 5th period, there's like, I'm not posting publicly ever. So it's all private. Yeah, what they said, answer choice C. Associative learning is when you make an association. Okay, classical conditioning and operant conditioning are both examples of associative learning. Habituation is a part of Unit 3 with sensation and perception, where you're able to block out sensory information as you become used to it or accustomed to it. Okay, number 2, the reappearance after a pause of an extinguished conditioned response is called what? Okay, excellent. I'm waiting to see if anyone will put something different than D, or they're like, oh, peer pressure. Yes, D, spontaneous E. Ella had the same, Ella Beth had the same reaction. Or F in the chat. Yeah, D is the correct answer. Spontaneous recovery is when you have the behavior reoccur. Okay, acquisition is when you first make the connection. Okay, when you first learn the behavior. Extinction is when you lose the behavior or the connection. Recovery is when you regain it. Number 3, the tendency, once a response has been conditioned for stimuli similar to the conditioned stimulus to elicit similar responses. We saw this with little Albert. He was conditioned to fear not only white rats, but also, thank you, Gavin, that's good, but also anything that was furry, even teddy bears. Excellent. It is A, generalization. Discrimination is the opposite. If little Albert had only been afraid of white rats, then he would have been showing discrimination of stimuli. Extinction is the losing of that behavior. And learned helplessness is a condition where animals and humans, when they're in a situation where they're not able to escape, okay, escape conditioning, they'll eventually give up trying to escape or change their situation. Yeah, they accept their fate. So abused animals show this as well as abused humans. So one of the confounding variables in abusive relationships is that you may think, oh, why doesn't this person leave if they're being treated so badly? It's because, one, that's dangerous. The most dangerous time to leave an abusive, or the most dangerous time in an abusive relationship is attempting to leave the abuser. And then 2, they learn through experience that resistance is futile. So even when they're given options to escape or change that situation, sometimes they just won't take that opportunity, okay, because they've been conditioned not to. 4, a blank is an innately reinforcing stimulus, such as one that satisfies a biological need. Yes. B, a primary reinforcer. A primary reinforcer is something that is unlearned. You don't need to learn that it is a reward. It is innately rewarding. A conditioned reinforcer is something that you have to learn the value of, like money. Okay? And negative reinforcement and positive reinforcement deals with stimuli, but they deal with conditioned and primary reinforcers. Okay, last question. Blank is reinforcing a response only part of the time. It results in slower acquisition, but has much greater resistance to extinction. Oh, Ella, that's cute. Throwing some Roman numerals in there. Good. D is partial reinforcement. Continuous reinforcement is when it's reinforced all of the time, and variable ratio refers to the number of behaviors. Fixed interval deals with the time between the behaviors. Okay, so let's compare and contrast classical conditioning with operant conditioning. With classical conditioning, the behavior is involuntary, so drooling or sleeping or being hungry. Behavior under operant conditioning is voluntary, so you running or studying, right? In classical conditioning, the events are presented to the learner, okay, like with little Albert being paired with a white rabbit and a loud noise, whereas operant conditioning, the events are produced by the learner. So you're crying in the shopping cart and you either get rewarded or punished. In classical conditioning, the events are caused or cause the behavior, whereas in operant conditioning, the events are the consequences, or they increase or decrease the behavior. Okay, so with classical conditioning, the learner does not have a choice. Okay, it is innate and involuntary, like the dog's drooling or the baby being afraid, whereas in classical conditioning, the learner does have a choice. And lastly, with classical conditioning, you have 2 stimuli. You pair something innocuous that's unrelated with something that creates a reaction until eventually it becomes a conditioned reaction. Whereas with operant conditioning, it's the learning through consequence, causes and effects. Your behavior is either increased or your behavior is decreased, depending on the response to that behavior. Does anyone need this slide? Yeah, I'll give you a second. Then we have one more slide before we'll end for the day, okay? Sam's like, no, don't go.
Are you going to be posting all of these lectures that we've been doing on? Okay.
Yeah. Once I get, I break them up into parts. Like I take out the housekeeping and I just put the content and then I put on the YouTube for y'all.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm. Are we good on this slide? All right. Last slide. Over justification effect. How many of you have gotten a reward for something you're already doing and it actually undermines the intrinsic value of what you're doing? Okay, such as like when I was in elementary school, we had the AR program, accelerated reading. Now I already liked reading, okay? I was reading anyway. So I read the Harry Potter series and I take this test and I get points so I can exchange it for toys at the end of the year. Right, Sam, are you okay? I thought you were choking on something. Keep coughing. Do you know how to do the Heimlich on yourself?
Joke.
Oh, well, that's one way. Eventually, though, in middle school, back when I was at Baldwin, they made the AR program a grade. Okay, it was a part of your minor grade. And so a lot of people who used to read for fun stopped reading for fun. It became a grade, kind of like in English class. Y'all are given books, and some of them are good books, like Lord of the Flies, you know, that slaps. But you're not going to enjoy the book as much because you're forced to read it because you know there's going to be a test on it. So the over-justification effect is when you're given a reward, but it decreases your intrinsic motivation to perform that behavior. So you're forced to do something, like in school, you're forced to learn. Well, y'all may remember being young, you used to love to learn. You would go on Wikipedia and you'd like Google something and you just go down a wormhole of clicking different links, learning more about like the Russian government or something weird, right? But now you don't do that anymore, okay? Because you're too busy being forced to learn things. You don't have enough time to go and search into your intrinsic interest. So that's the over-justification effect. You're being rewarded for behavior that used to be innately satisfying, and now that kind of takes the fun out of it. Are we good?